There are basically three ways to find meaning, starting with the one that most people think of first, which is usefulness, that you're doing something for somebody else, that you're creating a better world for others. This usefulness, that you're giving of yourself to make things better. Usefulness is fantastic. It is the equivalent of service for what we have in our opening statement. That if you can find essentially that as you give, you are making a difference in someone else's life, then that gives you meaning for what you're doing. I want to say one of the things we're going to be talking about is purpose. And by you being here, I have a purpose at least 1 hour a week. And so I really like that. Purpose. The talk was going to be the purpose of your life, or living with purpose. And as I was thinking about it, it dawned on me that really another way of saying that is, what is the meaning of your life? And after World War II, after his time in a concentration camp, Victor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in that, he explores the question of meaning. And he had just been through one of the most dehumanizing experiences one could go through, lost, I believe, all his family members, and was faced with this question in a very deep and profound way. And his answers, which he put into this book, really had become the beginning of logotherapy, which is the idea that having meaning is in itself therapeutic. It is healing, and it helps us face the world. And so many of us are living our meaning all the time, but we're not quite aware of it. And so part of what I'd like to do in this conversation is talk about the way he talks about it, so that even though it may not be obvious to you now, you might become more aware of what's meaning in your life, and therefore inoculate you to some of the tragedies that will befall you if you don't have it, which can be despair, a feeling of uselessness, even death can happen when we don't feel like there's something to live for. So let me start with this idea that you make your meaning by the way you do your life. And it is incumbent and inherent in you the way you are put together as a human being. It's incumbent in that you become aware of it by living. There's meaning in this, don't worry. We'll find it. As I was listening to this, what he was saying, I began to think of the phrase we use here to define the meaning of this church. As you know, we have a mission statement which says we're a spiritual community awakening to our divine nature through love, service, and personal transformation. And according to Victor Frankl, there are basically three ways to find meaning, starting with the one that most people think of first, which is usefulness, that you're doing something for somebody else, that you're creating a better world for others. This usefulness, that you're giving of yourself to make things better. Usefulness is fantastic. It is the equivalent of service for what we have in our opening statement. That if you can find essentially that as you give, you are making a difference in someone else's life, then that gives you meaning for what you're doing. I was talking to a woman recently, and I asked her, because I knew I was going to be talking about this, what is meaningful in her life, or what is her purpose? And she said, my purpose is to make at least one person's life better every day. I said, and is that satisfying for you? She said, yes. And I said, do you review it at the end of the night? She says, yes. And when I go to bed, I go, whose life have I improved today? And that gives some satisfaction. And so in many of the things she has wanted in her life, she doesn't have. But this thing she does, because every day she makes it a point to make something better. It may not be much. It may just be advice. It may be she calls somebody when they're lonely. Maybe she just tells somebody that they're okay, that they're lovely. Maybe she does something big for them. But she does one thing every day, and that is that service component. That is that usefulness component in making meaning. I think many people, if not most, find that's the way they find their meaning, by doing for others. But there are two more ways. And the second way is not by what you effect, but what affect. The feeling state, the interior state, your awareness of another person, another thing, to the depth in which it affects you. Love is a classic way of saying that. When you love someone, when you are deeply engaged with them in some way, and it is affecting you, it gives you meaning in that. And that meaning could be with nature as well. You could find profound meaning in doing that. So in my pursuit of this question, I was talking to another woman, and she said, for a long time, I was a dutiful wife, and I was a good Christian, and I read Bibles, and I studied the Bible, and I was very dedicated to my church. And then something happened, and she wouldn't tell me. She said, and now I walk in nature. That's what I do. And so I have the sense that this is potentially an example of this idea of loving something, not necessarily a person at this moment, but the world, the way the nature is, and the activity of being alive and moving through nature and feeling your body engaged healthily in nature and engaged with the challenge of all that exercise. That is what's giving her meaning now. But there are other people who find meaning on the interior by actually loving someone, by feeling the depth of their love for another, by that need almost, that transcendent getting out of your skin and into someone else's skin, by understanding them, to grok who they are, is another way of doing it. And the third way in that category is beauty itself. It could be art. It could be decorating your house. It could be making your garden, but increasing the amount of beauty in the world. And that's not so much doing for others, but it's attending to your own needs and nature. Second way. Third way. So we talked about doing for others, and we've talked about experiencing. But the other one is what we would use in this church is transformation. It is transforming who you are. Now, in Victor Frankl's case, he was in several concentration camps. And just meeting the moment was transformation in itself. Being able to maintain a willingness to live in that phase was a growth experience for him. And many people report this kind of thing. Vietnam veterans who were prisoners of war, other places there were prisoners of war where there was deprivation and torture and isolation, and they come back out of it saying it was a growth experience for me. And from the outside it would just look like loss, but from the inside they have been able to transform themselves by their willingness to take suffering and make it work for them. By what they could not change, they moved into a deeper level of meeting that challenge from their own strength. And that transformation would carry on through the rest of their life also. And so it is with people who are encountering disease, etc., or facing death. The whole thing, maybe they can't actually change it, though the first thing you would want to do is change it. Do not suffer unnecessarily. Victor Frankl is extremely repetitive in saying, first, make it better if you can, but if you can't, meet the suffering in a way that makes you better. Optimism, if you can hold it, willingness, strength of character, going deeper into compassion, some sense of transformation. So we in this church have this phrase, I'm a spiritual being awakening. We are a spiritual community, rather, awakening to our divine nature through love, service, and personal transformation. We are a spiritual community awakening to our divine nature through love, service, and personal transformation. Very much paralleling this idea of meaning as Victor Frankl puts it forth. So I was sitting here, we have this little meditation, and I was sitting here and I was going, I should answer that question, what is the meaning of my life? Because I have been very good at avoiding having a capsulated statement. I asked somebody who knows me pretty well, she said, the meaning of your life is your ego. And I didn't take offense because she didn't mean it in an offending way. She says, you just like to do you as big and as unrelentingly as you possibly can. And I went, yeah, that's really true. I really just do me. Do you know what I mean? And that wasn't listed in the book, but I'm telling you, it is another form of meaning, which is just, I'm just going to do it, right? And I said, I don't think I should tell the church that. And she said, no, because you came here to do the church, and you intended to do it, and you have been doing it for 22 years. Yeah, it'll work. So anyway, I've taken my risk with you for the day. But when I was sitting here this morning asking myself that question, it dawned on me that the statement that we use, awakening to our divine nature through love, service, and personal transformation, those are words I wrote with Paula Graff almost 20 years ago. And it turns out it was autobiographical. That's really what my trip is about, is that doing me, this is what doing me looks like. And it could be that sometime I'm of service to people, and sometimes I'm loving something, and sometimes I'm getting over or getting through something. So it is within one life, there are all these meanings. But the thrust of life is toward this awakening to who you really are. And you do that not simply to survive, but to go into a deeper awareness of the nature of who you are. Think about that. I want to change subjects slightly. One of the things that's happened in this time period for me is I've been confronted, as most of us have, by the fact that we have enormous environmental changes. We have wars and rumors of wars. We have political distrust of many of the institutions that have been foundational for our country are being questioned and therefore diminished in their current authority. They may be reborn, but right now there seems to be enough going on that if I was a teenager, I would despair, right? And I think I've mentioned this before, I asked a friend who essentially coaches large corporations on how they can be better stewards with their money and their power. And I said, do you ever get depressed by this whole thing? He goes, no, I always believe in the possibility. And what dawned on me after thinking about meaning was is that this period of absolute shaking of the foundations of our very existence, political, social, and environmental, all those things looking like they're teetering on the edge, are calling forth us to meet it in such a vigorous way that we do love, service, and personal transformation. And with that, perhaps, because we are faced with a challenge that seems so close to overwhelming, it's hard to believe we're going to pull it off. But in it is the possibility, and not only the possibility, the commandment to meet it if we wish to be alive or thrive at the very least. As Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, once said, the obstacle is the way. This enormous challenges, demands and gives us the impetus to transform. And so hopelessness could be just outside the door. We don't let it in. We face it. We find meaning in this challenge rather than defeat. We find willingness to act because of the obstacle, not because it's stopping us, but it is making us act. And the world, I think, is on the same trajectory that we are here. The world will awaken to its divine nature, facing a challenge as great as we have, if they meet it with meaning of love, service, and personal transformation. So let us have a little prayer for ourselves and a prayer for the world. Let us pray. First, tune into your heart, please. And as you do so, begin to feel into your own state, whatever it is. Let your heart take you a little bit out of your head. Centering in the heart. Remember that the word courage really has within it the heart. And let us meet these challenges of our lives. Should we have been feeling useless, let us realize that there are other ways of feeling meaningful other than by doing. And should we have felt unloved and unloving, there are other ways to find meaning than that. And if our transformation has seemed slow and tedious, perhaps we can be more useful and more loving. But somewhere in our very nature is the answer to our problem. Somewhere inside us is all the meaning we need. Let us face the world, and in so doing, face ourselves. For we are one and only one. And let us trust that wherever we are, that one is, and all is well. And so it is. Amen. I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.